First, before we begin, I'd like to just introduce you to our state representative. Lowell Russell is here. He's been a staunch advocate for this village, and we are really grateful. And also the District 7 Commissioner, Mr. Henry Cullen, is also here, and as you know, participates in this village in numerous ways. Thank you, gentlemen, both of you, for your support and everything you're doing for this village. So as a reminder, today's meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Thank you, Community Church. You guys are awesome. And within a couple days, it'll be available for playback on the HOA website. Also, if somebody wants to see it before then, you can live stream it on Tellico Church. So we have an invocation by Reverend Jennifer Reuter, if I said it correctly, a new associate pastor here at Community Church. We've got a quick HOA membership vote that John Bologna will explicitly explain to us. Karen Sue Keith is going to encourage us to sign up for some free CPR and Stop the Bleed courses. And then we're going to start the candidates forum with Bruce Johnson, who is currently the president of the POA Board, highlighting what the responsibilities are for a board member and from his viewpoint, what he thinks the most important characteristics are. And then we'll hear from the candidates. Unfortunately, to get you out by 6, things are timed, and we've already apologized to the speakers, but they'll spend no more than 5 minutes on a quick self-introduction, and then 10 minutes to respond to 2 of the 5 questions on the back of your agenda and do any wrap-up comments. We'll then, with time permitting, open it up to Q&A from the audience. You can ask a question of one candidate at that time, multiple, whatever it is you want to do. So at this moment, I'd like to invite Pastor Jennifer up. And again, we really want to thank you for the use of this fabulous facility.
Grace and peace to you on this beautiful fall afternoon. We want to extend a warm welcome to you on behalf of Community Church. We are grateful for this partnership and all of the work that the HOA does. Join me now in an opening prayer. Gracious God, we give you thanks and praise for the beauty of this season. We invite you into this space and ask for your wisdom and decisions. We ask that you would open our hearts and our ears to hear the issues that are being brought before us. We pray for these candidates and ask that you steady nerves and allow them to speak with clarity. In Christ's name we pray, amen.
So thank you, Pastor Jennifer. So a couple quick HOA notes. Per our bylaws, the HOA Board has approved a slate of candidates for 2020. It'll be posted on the website by early next week. There will be a vote on November 21st at the general meeting. We'd ask you to take a look at it. And also, that's also November 21st, where we're going to recognize all of the HOA volunteers that are unbelievable and make all of these things work for us. So we have one quick election issue, Mr. Bologna.
Thank you, Ellen. As many of you may know, Bill Basil, who was our social VP, had health problems in the spring, and the board has appointed Diane Dalgoffrey to become the VP social, but we need a vote on that from the people, from the membership. I would confirm the presence of a quorum here. That's easy enough. So I'll look for a motion to from Mr. Bogardus and Mr. Troach. And all those in favor of Diane Dalgoffrey as VP for social?
Aye.
Okay, she gets another 60 days.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Diane, for stepping in to help us. Okay, Karen Sue Keith, I'll let her give a little intro and walk you through a couple quick slides.
Good morning. My name is Karen Sue Keith. I am a registered nurse and a certified nurse practitioner. I've spent most of my life in a level 1 trauma and in an operating room. My partner is sitting out here today. It's Jan Sampson. Jan has a really neat background. She's taught science and math, has 2 master's degrees, and has done something I have never done and wouldn't know how to do, and that's pull people out of the water and resuscitate a drowning victim. I'm only good if you collapse in a hall. I can then maybe do something for you. Okay, but what we're going to talk about, and they say the first thing that you hear is what'll stay with you, and the very last thing. So hopefully I'll make those worth your while. Okay, let me see. Okay, I'm going backward.
Rubbed off one goes forward, yeah.
Okay, there we go. We teach the American Heart Association Live and Learn CPR for friends and family. We'll be talking about the symptoms of a heart attack. What we do a little different is our first hour is not from the American Heart, it's from us to you, and it talks about what do you really see when you have a heart attack, because you have all these signs and symptoms, and mostly they say chest pain. But would you be amazed to know that we had a gentleman who had nothing but nausea for 4 hours, and he died. He had a massive inferior wall, MI, and nausea goes with an inferior wall. So there are signs and symptoms that aren't necessarily well known. We try to go over those with you so that if it's happening to you, you understand what's happening and take action. We will also discuss stroke. Stroke is another thing that everybody thinks they know all about. If you look like the lady in the center picture there, you're having a stroke. Not necessarily. You can have a thing called the window shade effect, where you go blind in one eye for 4 to 5 seconds and it goes away. You're not sure it even happened. You have just had a TIA. Okay? So we kind of cover all those things so that you can hear what we're saying and you understand when something happens to you, particularly at our age, you need to pay attention and go talk to your doctor or go to the hospital. We will teach you the steps of CPR if you fail to recognize what's happening, and all else fails, if you arrest, we will teach you what to do. And you say to me, but I can't do that. I only weigh 90 pounds and I don't have the strength to do that. Well, maybe you can't, but if someone were standing there, you could then tell them what to do if you know how. If you don't know how, then you can't help. But if you know how, you know the steps, you know what's important to do, and you can implement that. We also will teach you how to use an external defibrillator. We call them an AED. You see them here in our church. They're right over by the coffee. You'll see them upstairs in the CLC. You will see them in other churches. You'll see them at the airport. Recognize what they look like. Know where they are. We will give you hands-on experience with the AED. We have 5 instructors with us now. One is critical care, one is cardiac, and one has 30 years in the military, okay, in Afghanistan and Iraq. All of it, so you will have someone working with you, 2 to 3 people on an AED with an instructor right with you, showing you how to use it. And you will learn that it's not frightening and it can save someone's life. We can keep you alive by jumping on your heart, but we can't bring you back without the AED. We will also talk about choking, both for the child and the adult. And many of you, I'm sure, have even done that to someone. It works, and it works very, very well. There is nothing, and I mean this with all sincerity, there is nothing worse than being in a crowd of people and not one of you know what to do. I've talked to people who've been through that, and the guilt, particularly if it's a family member, is unbelievable. If you know what to do, you get busy and you do it, and the fire department will come. They will be there in 2 to 3 minutes. But what we know is that for every minute lost, your chance of survival goes down 10%. Please don't be in that group of people. Come, let us teach you. We're happy to do that. There's no charge for the class. It takes 3 to 4 hours out of your day, and you may be able to save someone you love and care about. Thank you for listening. We have sign-up sheets outside for you to come. We have another sign-up sheet for Stop the Bleed. We have actual dates for you. If you don't know what dates you're available, give us your name and your phone number. We'll call and find a date for you. Thank you so much for listening to me today.
Thank you, Karen and Jan. Really worthwhile program. Next up is Bruce Johnson. He's going to share a little bit about what the jobs, roles, and responsibilities are of somebody who is elected to the POA Board.
I'd offer a joke or two, but I'm on the time. I'm on the clock. So, and I talk slow, so I need all the time I can get. So anyway, every year we hold an election, as we're doing this year. And as the candidates pick up a packet that helps them go through the process of applying for a position or being able to run for the board, they get a couple sheets of paper that show them what the responsibilities are for board members. And I'd just like to show those if I can. Which way do I go?
The rubbed off one.
Rubbed off one. There
Yep.
you go. Hey, I can understand that. Okay, so I know that's a very wordy chart, but basically what it is just to remind you that there are about 10 or 12 responsibilities, broad responsibilities that board members have. And what I wanted to point out was the 5 that I show up there in red. A few years ago, the HOA came to us as individual board members and they asked us, of all the responsibilities that you have, what do you think are the 5 most important? And they took that and they boiled it down, and you see it on their slides that they present occasionally. So those are the 5 that the board decided of all the things that we do that are most important. I'd like to go over those. And those are basically, number 1 is that you develop strategic direction. Of course, in doing that, we work with the long-range planning committee. We work with the members of the community at large. But what we do is we're trying to set the direction for which way this village will go, not only next year, not the 5 years, but even as far out as 20 and 25 years. So very important role that we perform there. The other one is that we have a village here of about 8,500 people or so, and it takes a lot to run this village. And to do that, we have to have a general manager and a staff. The board is responsible for picking that GM, and they're responsible for managing him and making sure that he is doing what we, the people in the village, want him to do. And your mouthpiece for getting that done is obviously the board. And so we hire the GM and we manage the GM, and thank God most of the time he works for us, and not only for us but with us. And so our hats off to our GM that we picked. The next one is we do, because of all the functions that we perform and the liability we have a lot of legal and fiduciary responsibilities. We carry those out. We are the Court of Appeals. If something happens and you do something in building your new home and it's not according to the Blue Book, we will find out, and we will ask you to undo it. You can appeal it, and then we'll come back. So that one is a big one too. And then finalizing budget. We're right in the middle of budget season. We've been after it for about 8 weeks. We'll be after it for about 2 or 3 more weeks. But suffice it to say that we want to exercise our fiduciary responsibility correctly, and we want input from you. You're invited to all the meetings, and so we encourage you to do so. On the next page, you'll see some more responsibilities that we have, and those are responsibilities essentially that help us do our day-to-day work in the village, and we execute through our POA staff. But the one that you see there in red is very important to all of us as board members, and that is to encourage feedback from you, the Tellico Village residents. Highly important to us. There's not a meeting that goes by that we don't talk about communicating and how we can communicate better and getting your feedback. You tell us what you want, and we'll see what we can do to get it done. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot more about our duties and responsibilities. You can look those up on our website, and also you'll get these as part of this the handouts, or what, not handouts, but the recordings and all for this night, right? And on the website. But what I wanted to go over is what I think and what I've gathered from other board members it takes to be a really good board member. And you need to evaluate these people on some of these characteristics. Number one thing is we think they have to have the ability to think strategically. We have a staff of 100 plus workers, as well as a good GM. They run the day-to-day, but we have to think strategically and set the direction for the village. You have to be capable of negotiating. My time is up, but I'm going to go quickly over these. You have to be able to negotiate, and the reason why is because you can't always get your way. And if you want to have your voice, then you may be able to not only negotiate, but the next one is you have to compromise. Sometimes you give and a take. You have to obviously be good financial managers. You have to be willing to work with and for all villagers, not just a group, not just Kahidi, not just Miolakwa, not just Coady. You have to work with the whole village. Then last one, you have to be willing to listen first and then be heard. You have to take all the villagers' input, boil it down, and then be heard as to what your decisions are going to be. And last but not least, it's not a board of 1, it's not a board of 2, it's not even a board of 3, it's a board of 7 people. And we all, to make this work as a village, we all have to work together as a team. And I must say that I think that the 7 people that we have on the board now makes a great team. We're working together for the benefit of the whole village, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Challenge to try and pack all that in. But as Bruce was saying, again, in a couple days, we're going to have all the slides on the HOA website, a live stream, a video of this, so if you missed anything, you can get it then. So a couple things. To not give anybody an unfair advantage, we actually drew numbers out of a brown paper bag earlier today, and the candidates are going to speak first in that order for the self-introduction, and then speak in the reverse of that order for the answer to the questions and the wrap-ups. So it may be slightly different than the order on the agenda. So first up will be Steve, then Sue English-Kovar, then Susan Kirk, and then Marty Inkrot. Steve, you want to come test if we reordered the slides correctly?
Yeah, that's it. Good afternoon, everybody.
I apologize.
What?
Before each of the speakers talk, if you could look for 5 seconds at Jim. He wants to take a nice picture of us.
Cheese. That's $5. Okay. Seems like yesterday I was up here asking for your vote because I was up here in the fall of 2017. I guess time flies when you're retired and you're working on the board, especially during budget season, because those of you who have gone to our meetings know we spend a few hours in the budget sessions. For those of you who don't know me, a little bit of my background. My wife Debbie is sitting in the audience. She's an avid, you're looking around, like you don't know who you're. Avid mahjong player. I, on the other hand, like to play golf, so I'm a member of the MGA. We're also members of the HOA and New Villagers. I've been on the board since March of 2018. I was seated on the board by the existing board members after Sue Tinder had to resign her position. So at that time when I was running on the basis that I really care about our property values, I care about the quality of the life, and I care about how you manage that in a financially responsible manner. Those issues are still the same today. That's why I'm going for a second shot at working on the board. If you take a look at my platform for 2017, there were 3 basic areas I was focused on, and I'll tell you what I'm working on later. But number 1 was the operational security of our infrastructure, your roads, your water, your sewer system, your amenities. The second item that was missing 2 years ago was a long-term strategic plan. Where are we going? What's happening to the growth? What do we need to do to prepare financially to provide what the property owners need? And 3 is just position ourselves for the future. If you take a look what's happened over the last 19 months that I've been on the board along with the POA have completed assessments of our water system, our sewer system. The reason we did that was to identify any constraints, any operational issues, any major capital expenditures. What you're going to see in the 2020 plan is we're going to be building a 500,000-gallon water tank in the north end of the village. This is to offset the low water pressure we're seeing. So we are addressing that issue in 2020. That's about $1 million project. It will be fully funded out of the water and sewer reserves. There are other phases of the project as we grow later on in the budget. From a sewer system, we're basically okay today, but there are projects that we're going to have to spend money on to upgrade our systems to handle capacity issues as we grow out. We also completed the evaluation of our road surfaces. The reason that was critical is because last year we had a 15-year plan with our best guess as to what it was going to cost us to maintain our roads over the next 15 years. Now we actually have an assessment of every mile. We've adjusted our forecasts, which results in us having to spend approximately $1 million a year. So now we have a plan in place scheduled for when we resurface or when we put HA5 on. A surprise hit us last year with the Wellness Center. We had to buy a new dehumidification system, and by the end of this year, we'll have a new steel roof sitting on the Wellness Center. That project combined totals between $800,000 and $900,000 of unbudgeted spending. That has to be funded out of the reserves. We just completed the Tokwa Clubhouse, and the Kahidi Community Center was opened earlier this summer. Those projects totaled well over $3 million. To do all that, we took out another loan for about $1.2 million, but all these projects don't come without a financial consequence. We have basically depleted our amenity reserve and our maintenance reserves, which need to be rebuilt. Another part that we completed, that we just saw the final cut of the plan was the long-term strategic plan will be shared with the property owners within the next couple of months. My focus is in 2023. Number 1 is we must rebuild our reserve funds to a fiscally responsible level. We need to stay focused on the operational security of our infrastructure and our amenities, and we need to develop an executable succession plan for our executive management team to assume business continuity. And in conclusion, my experience is 19 months on the board. I had a 35-year career with Alcoa and Century Aluminum. I was basically in the financial area, operations, accounting, finance, purchasing, IT, internal controls, internal and external financial reporting, procurement, and capital project management. All the skills you need to run a $20+ million business is what we have here in the village. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Steve. Sue?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out on such a gorgeous day today. So, okay, I have to remember the one that has no marks on it. So, first of all, I just wanted to give you a little background about myself. You know, I spent my entire life in the state of Illinois until my husband Mark and I came here to East Tennessee and we found Tellico Village. So Tellico Village was such a wonderful place. We had looked far and wide and nowhere could we find a place that had the amenities, the financial strength, and the affordable cost of living that we all find here today. So as I said, we ended up buying our property in 2005 and we're finally able to retire in 2014 and come down. But I'd like to go back just a little bit and probably answer the question that every single one of my friends asked me, which was, why are you running? And so basically, you know, I gotta tell you, no matter what community I'm in order to really be a part of it, I've always felt like I need to be contributing and be involved in it. Back when I was in Illinois, I was very, very involved in our church, and I also spent 4 years on our Homeowners Association Board, which is similar to POA. We were responsible for the revenue and expense management, and the only way I got off of that board was moving to Tennessee. So anyway, so let's go ahead and move on. I have the professional and the community experience required to serve all of you effectively. So what does that mean? So I've already talked about the homeowner board experience in Illinois. Also, what I'd like you to take a look at is the fact that since Mark and I moved here in 2014, we automatically joined HOA and New Villagers. First night at New Villagers, I immediately signed up to be an event coordinator. Soon after that, I became the vice president of activities for New Villagers. And when Mark and I graduated, I was asked to be the vice president of social for HOA. Then became the vice president of program, which turned into becoming president last year for the Homeowners Association. So the most important thing to me in my term as president of the HOA was to really make sure that we focused on our role as the voice and the advocate of the people of Tellico Village and our members. And I think we did a pretty good job of that last year, and Ellen continues that this year. So that's what your HOA board is doing with you that I really wanted to get started. The second part that I wanted to talk about is the fact that as president, and even now as past president of the HOA, I became really close to the POA in terms of the board, the committees, and everything else. And so I really became very close to how the POA operates, how the board operates. So from a professional perspective, I spent 30 plus years as a program manager for a large pharmaceutical firm and ran global programs, which means what? So managing budgets, human resources, communications, collaboration, teamwork, you name it. We'll talk more about that on another slide. So lastly, what I'd like to say is, so how will I work for you? Here's what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to listen, as I've been doing, to all of you, as I've been doing since I was president of the HOA, to understand what's important to you. And granted, you know, people are on both sides of many, many topics, but it's listening to you all first and understanding what's important to you. Second of all is to learn from our very talented POA committees. It's amazing the talent we have out there. And so listening to them, learning from them, listening to you, and then taking all of that to make good, informed, balanced decisions. So that's what I'd like to leave with you and ask you to think about me when you vote on the 3rd. Thanks.
Susan?
I'd like to say thank you to the community church for having us here this afternoon, the HOA for sponsoring us, and you for being here. I'd like to share with you my current involvement, my vision for Tellico Village, and my past experience that makes me qualified for the board. I've always been involved in community service wherever I've been. The same applies for the almost 3 years' time that I've been here. I may have encountered some of you while responding to emergencies. I'm a firefighter and emergency medical responder for our village fire department. That's not the preferred way for me to meet new people, but it has given me experience in addressing our residents' needs. In addition, I have served as the vice chairman of the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee, which you've heard so much about, the committee that's been charged to look to the future of the village. With resident input, this committee examined issues impacting housing, infrastructure, transportation, recreation, amenities, and everything in between. The results will be presented to the POA Board next month. I'm currently chairman of the Governmental Affairs Committee, chartered by the POA Board. We are responsible for raising Tellico Village's visibility with county, state, and federal agencies. Our main goal is to give our community a voice that has often gone unheard. I'm a graduate of Loudoun County Sheriff's Citizens Academy. I am a member of a Time for Herbs Garden Club. And when the need arises, I give a helping hand to the Lions, Rotary, and Friends of the Library. My vision for Tellico Village: that we remain a vibrant and secure community, proactive in meeting the needs of all of our residents. Sounds simple, it's anything but. It calls for a POA board that can anticipate change, that has experience to maintain a responsible fiscal balance in the face of conflicting demands. We have current infrastructure changes: water, sewer, roads, housing, amenity wants, needs. Our planning efforts show we will face others in the future: a community center, a senior center, expanding amenities, adding new amenities. That said, the POA board needs members with the experience to recognize and prioritize needs, establish realistic budgetary constraints, and effectively represent village residents. I have that experience, both appointed and elected. 4 years appointed to Planning, Zoning, and Community Redevelopment Agency boards. 6 years elected on the City Council of Crystal River, Florida, a small coastal city on the Gulf of Mexico, similar in size to Tellico Village. In my 2 terms, twice elected vice mayor by the City Council. This tenure gave me experience in all facets of civic leadership: budgeting, contract negotiations, personnel, funding, public safety, police and fire, infrastructure, recreation, transportation, planning, concerns of the citizens. In short, all of the issues confronting us in Tellico Village. I also served on several intergovernmental boards dealing with regional issues that dealt with the city: routing of power lines, a planned path for the bypass expressway that would have affected our city, establishment of minimum flow levels for our water district sources, adoption of a nature refuge, activities that gave me skills in negotiation and collaboration with different county, state, and federal agencies. Ultimately, the governor of Florida appointed me to the board of a local county hospital. This is leader experience that is directly applicable to that needed by a POA board member. My years of community experience, my elected experience, give me the experience and background to effectively manage the affairs of the village as a member of the board. My promise to you: I will always listen, seek consensus in resolving contentious issues, make objective evaluations, and base decision on facts, not emotions. Again, my name is Susan Kirk. I'm listening. I ask for your vote. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Susan. Marty?
Got to pose. Good afternoon. My name is Marty Inkrot, and what I want to do is spend a little bit of time telling you about myself, why I decided to run for the POA Board, and then what my priorities would be. So first, a little bit about myself. My wife, Carol, sitting in the audience right over here, she and I moved to Tellico about 3.5 years ago. A little bit of an interesting story. I had never heard of Tellico, and a good friend and now my neighbor had bought a place and showed it to us, and we kind of fell in love with it. So I ended up calling a friend that works over at Pilot Flying J. He was the CIO or the CFO there, and was asking about Tellico, and one thing led to another, and he ended up offering me a job at Pilot Flying J. So then we moved down here. I retired from Marathon, and we moved down here and worked the first 2 years that we were here. After that, I retired the end of 2017. It's like, okay, what do I do with all my spare time now? So I did the usual thing. I went to the wellness center, enjoyed all the amenities of Tellico Village. Played more golf, started playing pickleball. I think that's what everybody else does here. And joined New Villagers. And then I was fortunate enough to be asked to be the president of New Villagers, and that's what I am right now. And the other thing that we got involved in was our church. We're trying to get more involved in that, where incidentally I'm a cantor and I sing in the choir. And that's a little easier than doing this, let me tell you. My work experience. I retired after 36 years at Marathon Petroleum Company, and then again after 2 years with Pilot Flying J. I was a technology leader and a business leader, and I think that the experiences I have there will really benefit me in being a POA board member. Importantly, I have a business mentality, a business perspective. Bruce showed all of the requirements for board members, and all the responsibilities that I've had in my career check a lot of those boxes. We are running a $20 million business here. So I have budgeting and cost control experience. I've experienced establishing challenging performance criteria for key individuals. Now I see Winston sitting in the audience here, and I think I really want to clarify that in saying that it's the job of the POA board to work with the manager here, the general manager, and to help him be successful, because then we all win. I'm also an active listener, and I will seek to engage residents to ensure different perspectives are considered before we make any decisions. So why run for the POA board? Outside of being recruited, the reason I'm running is because we love this place. Go back to why we came here in the first place, all the amenities, the active lifestyle. That's what drew us here, that's what keeps us here. And then after we've been here for 3 years, it's the relationships that we've made. So we really like it here. It's a great place, and it's a good deal. Like I said before, New Villagers got us more involved, and through that process, I got to know Ellen and the HOA a little bit more, and also the POA and how it operates. So I'm running for the board because I believe I can leverage my business experience to help keep Tellico Village thriving and appealing, not only for current residents, but also for potential new residents. And I believe that the relationships that I've built over the past 3 years, I'll be a good resident representative. Quickly, I want to just show you a chart here. Oops. This is a chart of new villager growth over the past several years. And you can see the last 4 years, we've had market growth in new villager population. And the very last column is just year-to-date September. So by the end of the year, I project that it'll be the same as the prior 3 years. So this tees us up for what I consider to be our top priorities. Steve mentioned it, and I think all the candidates agree that infrastructure maintenance is the top priority. We have to stay on top of our roads, our water, our sewers, and our facility. We need preventive maintenance systems in place to be sure that we're being proactive in our maintenance. And we need to keep our facilities up to date. Parking is a big issue at the Yacht Club and at Tenassi. We need to be sure that we continue to have first-class amenities. That's what keeps us here. That's what makes Tellico Village appealing to new residents, and that's what keeps our property values up. And finally, communication. And I'm not talking about next door. We need residents to be aware of the issues the POA Board is facing and have the opportunity to voice their opinions before a vote is taken. So just a quick summary. I know I ran out of time. When I timed it myself, for some reason I was more like 4 minutes, so sorry. But in summary, what I bring is solid business experience to be an effective POA board member. I work well with others, I'm an active listener, and I think I'd be a good representative for the residents. Tellico Village is a special place, and I want to do my part to help keep it that way and to make it even better. Thanks.
Thanks, Marty. So just a quick intro. We heard from many of you and boiled down some of the questions you wanted asked of the candidates to these 5. In the interest of time, we asked them to consider picking any 2 of the 5 to address in their next 10-minute segment. So I'd be hard-pressed personally to do justice to more than 2, but that's the challenge. So they'll be picking some of those. Again, we're reversing the order that we did for the self-introductions, so we're going to start with Marty on his questions for this. Oh, is it? Thank you, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. So I chose question number 1 and question number 3. The first one is, what does the POA board need to start, stop, and accelerate? I think the items that I put down mostly are continue doing and accelerate. Steve mentioned the water pressure issues. That's certainly something that we have to get resolved. And so I think we're taking the right steps, and the current board has approved, I think they've approved, the new water tank up in Coyote, so that should help things quite a bit. Also mentioned the reserves. We've made some big investments here the last year with Kahiti and Tokwa, the water tank now coming up, and also the roof at the Wellness Center. So we've depleted our reserves. We need to be responsible and get those back up to good levels. I mentioned parking a little bit ago. When we have new villager meetings at the yacht club, and I know other large events too, parking is a big problem. We need to figure that out. And then also at Tenacity. Susan mentioned that she's on the, what are you on? The Government Affairs Committee, sorry. I think that's great. I think, we continue to grow, we continue to add to the tax base of our county, and it's important for us to work with them, not ask for handouts, but to work with them and see if there's opportunities for mutual benefit. We also need to challenge the cost structure. Steve mentioned that as part of the budget process, and I saw him in action, and I tell you, he does a really good job. He really does, as do the other board members as well. But don't just take the numbers that are presented. Always challenging, are there opportunities where we can be diligent in how we spend our money? We all do that at home as well, so it just makes sense. And then offering alternative capital funding for amenities. We've got the foundation starting up, Timeless Tellico. So I think that's a great opportunity to raise more money for new amenities. It's not my idea, but one of the people that I've talked to said, another option would be maybe asking people to donate money. For example, if we wanted a golf simulator, right? Or pick your item. But if that would cost $100,000, get several people to donate, and then say, well, that'll go towards a credit for you to help pay for that, or to use it once it's in place. So just kind of thinking out of the box for how we might be able to add more amenities rather than just getting it from the reserve funds or from the budget. And then finally, communication. We have good communication processes in place today. We've got the telegram, we've got the Truth Be Told out on the POA website, but I think that there's just a general awareness opportunity that we can get out to people. Because a lot of people that I've talked to since I've announced my candidacy for the board is that they think that we need better communication. We need to be more aware of the issues that are in front of the board. So I think that there's an opportunity there, and we'll continue to press for that. So that was my first question. My second one was question number 3, and that was, to summarize it, basically the growth impact on our infrastructure and amenities. I said it before, and I'll keep saying it, and as I know a lot of other people do as well, but we need to have proactive infrastructure maintenance programs in place. You know, where I worked before, we had a planned maintenance and inventory control system. We need something similar to that here to be sure that we're staying on top of the crucial infrastructure that we all need and use every day. We need to keep our facilities up to date. You know, we've done a great job with Kahiti and Tokwa. Now we need to be looking at, are there opportunities at Tanasi and at the Yacht Club? Parking, again, keeps coming up, but it is a huge issue. What can we do about parking both at the Yacht Club and Tanasi? Docks. I attended a docks committee meeting, and they talked about this potential for a dry dock business. We still have capacity for, I believe, to add another 144 docks, and we have it in the budget this year to add 34. So we'll keep watching that. Well, not we, but the POA board will keep watching that and say, okay, we need to be staying out in front of demand. But in the future, that dry dock business might be something that we'll want to consider. And then finally, do we close the gates? Obviously not. I mean, and do I support the marketing efforts? Most certainly. We're going to continue to have turnover, and we want Tellico Village to be on top of people's minds. Now, the caveat to that is we need to continue to challenge the costs that it takes for marketing. And I saw that in this year's budget process, and I see Joe and Frank sitting here, and if I make it on the board, that will continue to be the case, because we want to be sure we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. So those are 2 questions I answered. And to wrap up, you know, we live in quite the gem here in Tellico. My wife and I always say, you know, we just pinch ourselves. We can't believe that we live here, and with all the great things that Tellico Village has to offer. And it doesn't just happen by chance. It happens because we've got people that are willing to give of their time to make this a better place. We've got a lot of talented people in this village, and just to see them act, and if you look at all the advisory committee people that we have, and they're leveraging their experiences from their work life, and we all benefit from that. And so I want to do my part in helping this village remain a destination that people want to come to, and to keep our quality of life up as well as our property values. With that, I say thank you.
Thank you, Marty. And you will have an opportunity again to ask some questions in the Q&A. Susan?
Ready? Thank you. I'm going to start with growth in marketing. The question was, given the village forecasted population growth, how do you propose we manage the impact on infrastructure, amenities, and maintenance? Do you support the current marketing efforts or agree with those who talk about closing the gates? When it comes to growth, there's no closing the gates. People have a right to sell or build upon the land they own. You handle growth by managing it, and the only way you do that is with a strategic long-range plan tied to your fiscal capacity. Then you work your plan, you prioritize, you stay focused, revise when presented with factual information, execute, then do it again, and work your plan. Why should we care what we look like in 15 to 20 years? We may not be here, we may not be using these amenities anymore. We could say that. You could say, yeah, that's true, we might not. But we all probably have one more move to make in our lives, and that is when we need to get the maximum amount of net value out of our homes, and we'll want to do so in the least amount of time. That is how you link long-range planning to marketing. Marketing does more than bring in new tours and buyers into the village. It is our branding, it is our message. It is why we are seen as an active adult community, not a retirement community. Marketing provides the projections helping us to estimate growth. For example, baby boomers are retiring at 10,000 per day. That's going to be capping out in 4 years and continuing until 2030. This information is priceless in helping us to accurately plan for the growth coming our way and to model our strategic plan. Marketing also helps us ride through our rougher economic times. We won't always be having such a nice economic forecast. However, currently we are at an all-time high for the price of $153 per square foot when selling your home. That's a really nice increase. Since January 2017, 740 existing homes have been sold, cashing in equity of $30 million, an average of $40,000 per household. The average home is worth more than $54,000 than just 30 months ago. Houses are staying on the market again a record short time of only 2.5 months to sell your home. This is how our marketing works for us. This is what proactive planning looks like, and this is how you manage growth. I'd like to move on to discuss the skill set or knowledge for the board. What specific skills or knowledge set do you feel you would be bringing to the POA board? As you heard in my introductory speech, as a city council member for 6 years in Florida, I was a negotiator, a diplomat, a communicator, listener, speaker, and advocate for the residents of the city. I have dealt with all issues currently facing our village: water expansion, sewer capacity, roads, housing, amenities, personnel, and the fiscal impact of all of those. I have taken decisive action on all of these and more. A few examples of things I handled: expansion of a wastewater treatment plant and rate increases, expanding water and sewer capacity to outlying areas of growth, facing growth developers who wanted high-risers on the waterfront. I led the initiative for a height limit in the city, which still stands today. Dealt with the expansion of amenities in the city, lighting tennis courts, boat launching options, a boardwalk, city parks, amphitheater, kayak launches, and manatee viewing opportunities without getting in the water. I ran on the platform of revising our land development code so that we could prepare for growth. Where can a boat be parked on a homeowner's lot, if it can be parked on a homeowner's lot at all? Does a new building conform to an existing neighborhood? Should it be allowed? How close can a home or swimming pool be to the waterfront? Very contentious issues when you're talking about a waterfront community and where someone wants to put something on the property that they own. An example of a very sensitive issue where I went where no one had gone before. I stepped out in front. There was impending development of 58 acres of sensitive waterfront land with major springs on the interior part of the property. It was a mandatory sanctuary. I initiated a private discussion one-on-one with the landowner and asked him outright how we could put that property in city hands. And I didn't worry too much when he laughed at me. That conversation between he and I led to a discussion with state agencies because there were protected water issues on that, wetlands, and things that needed to be considered by SWIFMUD, the state agencies in Florida. From there, we went into federal agencies and discussions with conservation groups. Ultimately, the 58 acres is now co-owned by the city, the state, and managed by the federal government. It is now known as the Crystal River National Wildlife Refuge, and that started with a private conversation with the landowner. All of these examples highlight the expertise and leadership needed to navigate and resolve some of the issues we deal with, not just in the village, but with county officials and with other state agencies, TRDA, TDOT, TVA, etc. I welcome the challenge. What I offer you as a candidate, again, is that I will always listen. I will make decisions based on the information presented, and I will represent you, the homeowners of the village. Susan Kirk, don't forget, I'm listening. I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Sue?
Okay, so as everybody said, we've been asked to answer 2 questions. So the first question that I'll be talking to is what thing or things do you think the POA board needs to do? And so I think just first now, I know Bruce went through and he told us all of the responsibilities of the board, but just quickly, in my mind, the board is responsible for determining the direction of the POA operations to ensure current and enduring health of our Tellico Village amenities and infrastructure. So what does that look like? And you're hearing a reoccurring theme here. Ensuring that our amenities meet the needs of the village demographics and are well maintained. So as we change, our amenities need to change. Ensure the infrastructure is consistently maintained and for which an ongoing plan exists. So again, getting to that strategic nature of the job of a board member, making sure that we're not just looking here, but we are looking 10 years down the road. Ensure appropriate reserves are in place for amenities and infrastructure. So again, that's the whole thing of tying a bow around how do we make sure our amenities and our infrastructure are where they need to be now and where they need to be in the future. And then I think most importantly for the board is operating in a transparent manner to ensure that members have easy access to official status of POA activities and current issues. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next question that I take on. So, or as we move forward here. So the next thing we were asked is what should we start, what should we stop, and what should we accelerate doing? So what should the board start doing? And here we go, information sharing. And I have to say, the board and Beth and her group have done a great job of getting a communication policy out there. Now we need to put the feet to that to get that moving. So communicating in a timely, accurate, and consistent manner. Issue management. We need to make sure that if there's an issue out there, even if we don't know exactly how we're going to resolve it, we as a community understand that the board is aware and the board wants to make sure that we know that we're working on it. Event and meeting information. Let's make sure that all of the venues that we have for communicating information are consistent across the board. And finally, project plans. We need to make sure that we have good, solid communication plans within those project plans. So what should the board stop doing? I think overall operations from a POA perspective is to avoid operating in silos, and certainly nobody plans to operate in a silo. You come in, you're doing the things that you're supposed to do, but what we need to make sure we instill into our staff is ensuring cross-functional communication and impact analysis. So what I mean by that is whatever you're doing, how does that impact many of the other things that are going on here in the village, and to avoid conflicts and encourage, the overall well-being of all of the operations that are going on here. So just a real simple one is when people come off the golf course at 4 o'clock, it'd be really nice to make sure that you can go and get a drink at Tokwa. So, I mean, that's a simple one. There's a whole lot harder ones. Talked a little bit about the docks and adding more docks. What about parking? What about those things? But all things that aren't going to get solved right here today, but need to be worked on. So what should the board accelerate? Process improvement sounds really boring, but let me tell you, I don't care if you're running a multi-billion-dollar business, that I was familiar with, or if you're running a $2 or $20 million business, which the POA is. That is the block and tackling of making things go. So follow standard project management process. And again, on my next question, I'll go through what that means. Adhere to standard operating procedure for bid procurement. So we need to make sure that even if we do know a supplier and been working with them, we need to make sure we're challenging and have others that are allowed to bid so we understand what our other opportunities are. Establishing human resource processes for staff transition and succession planning. We need to make sure that we're capturing all of that knowledge that's with our current employees, so then as they move on and we need to recruit other people, we have that in place. And certainly on the tail of that is succession planning. Let's make sure that our staff is being developed so that they're prepared for that next move or moving into something else. And then finally, execution of a centrally managed communication process. Again, Best Group's done a great job coming out with that communication policy. Now we need to put the execution into that. So my second question is, what skills or knowledge set do you bring to, will I bring to the POA board? So I mentioned that I spent over 30 years or so with a large pharmaceutical company managing global initiatives for them. And honestly, that covered every business function, every technology, every geography, every culture, because we worked across the world. And in that, so the first thing and the obvious thing is goal and objective definition. We need to make sure as a POA board that we are very clear and making sure that the goals that we set forth are those that are the right ones for the community. And then on the tail of that is, for each of those goals, we need to have measurable objectives to meet them. And the fact of the matter is, we can't improve what we can't measure. So we need to make sure that we have measurable goals in place. Change management. So what's change management? Change management really talks about the need for everyone to understand what their role is in any particular initiative or thing going on, and understanding and feeling comfortable with what their role is or how they're going to be impacted by that. Communication planning and execution is sort of a piece of that change management and really talks to, and this is a mouthful, develop and carry out consistent, transparent, relevant, accurate, and timely communications. So all of the that are affected are armed with the right information. Not an easy job, is it, Beth? So it's a big job, but guess what? We got to do it. We got to tackle that and make it real. Human resource management. So again, we need to make sure our staffs have clear, measurable role definition to ensure the best available resources are procured for each position, and then we're working with those resources by setting and managing expectations. Going on, so budget management, there's the biggie. So as a program manager for a corporation, you're expected to set your budget, and you're expected to stick to that budget. It's not going to be any different here. We're only working with $20 million a year. And guess what? The other part of that is, when you think that's the amount of money that you need for your particular initiative, get ready to give some of it back if you need to for the better of the total community. So next is schedule management. And again, that's just basically reasonable schedules and based on what the resources we have, budget allocations, and making sure that we're figuring out right at the beginning and defining what do we think our risks are and planning for it, and then also making way and having a plan as issues come up. Collaboration, so that's the biggie here. When you're managing a program across the globe and across different organizations, you need to make sure that, because a lot of those people don't directly report to you, you need to make sure that everybody's bought into that and is working toward the same goal and believes in it. And the same thing happens here. So the last thing is, I'd ask you to think about my knowledge of the village. I've been contributing and serving the village for the last 5 years. So in closing, why am I the right choice for the board? I understand as you do what Telego Village needs. Amenities, outstanding and maintained amenities that meet the needs of the community and change as the community changes. Infrastructure, we've talked a lot about that today. Continue to plan well for our current infrastructure and make sure that we're solid going forward. And the reserves, again, wrap a bow around the amenities and the infrastructure to say we have to have the right monies in place to support all of this. And to Steve's comment, yeah, we've got a lot of work to do. So a real challenge to the board. So in closing, what I'd like you to think about is my professional and community experience and leadership, and that's really my strength, and that's what I offer to this board. My service to Tellico Village is really what sets me apart. I've been serving since I've gotten here. And then know that I'll utilize all these things to represent the villagers, all of you, on the POA board. And with that, I ask for your vote on the 3rd. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Steve.
Thank you. I just can't say everything that they said and I agree with, so I can pass.
You could.
I
It's
could.
your option.
Okay. All right, I picked the first question was specific skills or knowledge that I would bring to the board. Well, the first thing I'd say, well, after spending 19 months on the board, I have a pretty good idea of how the POA operates, where the cash comes in, where the cash goes, how it gets disclosed to our property owners. If you take a look at the financial statements from 2018 versus 2017, the audited statements, you'll see there's been expanded disclosure in the footnotes. That's one of the things that I have experience in, is external and internal financial reporting. The second point is reserve fund management. What we have today, specifically, let's take the maintenance reserve. It's truly a savings account. The board's got like a 5 to 10 year plan. We look at major maintenance projects, major capital projects, and we take a look at funding to see what can come out of reserves. So in reality, what you're doing is forecasting a future expenditure in the next 3 to 5 years, 1 to 5 years, and funding it. What I've been pushing and will continue to push if I'm reelected will be to complete a full reserve fund study. The difference being is you take a look at all your assets, you take a look at their replacement costs, you take a look at their renovation costs, remaining useful life, and how much of that asset have you used up. And you start funding a reserve on typically a 30 to 40% basis to account for the used up portion of that asset, so when it's time to replace, you have the funds. I'll give you an example. We just learned last week that we're going to have to replace what's called a wave attenuator. New word for me. But these, I guess these attenuators are designed to break up the waves that come into the breakwater. Well, the one at the yacht club is 25 years old plus. We found out it's going to fail. There are $0 that have been specifically reserved for that type item. That's a $220,000 expenditure. To give you a sense of what that means, if you take your POA assessment, 2.25% times your monthly assessment would pay for that $220,000. So the difference in approach is you schedule your assets and you start funding them. For instance, we would start funding the renovation or a new roof or whatever for the new Tokwa clubhouse. And you proceed to accrue funds in a reserve over time, so you have the funds available when you have these unforeseen replacement issues. Capital project management, my history, my 35 years, I dealt with multi-million-dollar projects across the world. We have the same we have processes here where we define a capital project, justification, and monitoring. I can say that Winston and crew, with the 2 major projects we just had with Kahiti and Tokwa, both projects came in on time and on budget. If you take a look at the history here, I'd suggest to you that that wasn't always the case. Budget development and controls. That was one of my strong suits because my background was in cost accounting with Alcoa, developing plans, financial planning and analysis. That's critical to managing our funds here and your POA fees. Performance management. I have been, again, supporting the development of what's called non-financial indicators for management. You have a budget, but there are assumptions in those budgets, such as what's your delinquency rate on your property owner assessments? How many slips are going to be open or occupied? What's your water loss rate that feeds into your water costs? Such metrics can be used to manage the performance of the executive management team. Our procurement process of supplier development. I was director of procurement for Alcoa, based out of Alcoa, Tennessee for a while. I understand what it takes to develop suppliers, track their performance. We need to improve our ability to get qualified bidders for our projects. Several times we go out for project bids, we'll get 1 or 2 bidders. We'll send it out to 11, we get 2. We need to work on that process. The other item is I have a degree in applied behavioral science, which is change management. There are techniques to try to get change implemented. And my 35 years with Alcoa and Century Aluminum give me the background and the skill set to help manage this $20+ million business. Second question I took, which was hot topics. How would we improve communications from the board? So first of all, we are currently working on improving the current communications that we have coming out of the POA, the telegram, the news flashes, etc. With the high use of your mobile devices, there are different ways to make it easier to pick out the stories you want to read. If you go online and pick a news channel, there's always a picture with a little subtitle as to what the article's about. Why can't we go that way where it's easy for our property owners to understand what's going on? I also believe we need to start having quarterly town halls where we have the general manager, Winston, and the board give you a status update of the financials, activities, major projects, but also have a structured approach where property owners can issue questions, concerns that can be addressed. We typically have a state of the village meeting, but I think we need to do that more often. On the standing agendas for the board meetings and for workshops, I could see us modifying, no offense to the HOA and no offense to new villagers, but we have time set aside in every board meeting to get an update from the HOA and the new villagers. We could do that quarterly or do it semi-annually, free up that time on the agenda to have a standard item, a structured hot topic section where we could have a process set up where property owners could send in their hot topic ahead of time. It would be filtered, prioritized and put on the agenda, and we'd spend specific time talking about hot topics. However, there's another side of this coin. After spending 19 months on the board, I can tell you from my experience, I think all the hot topics that I've seen on Nextdoor and here or otherwise are talked about. So I think there is a property owner responsibility as well. The board, we hold open meetings twice a month, 24 times a year at a minimum. I think we've spent 6 or 8 days looking at budgets. They're all open to property owners. We have advisory committees. They meet in open session 1 day a month. We've got the telegram, we got the website, we got the quarterly letter. So to answer this question, what do we do with hot topics? I urge property owners to get involved. If you got a question, contact Winston or the staff, or contact a board member. Our email addresses are listed on the webpage. I can guarantee you none of the board members are hiding from questions. So if you got a burning desire and a hot topic, pick up the phone and call. We are always available. And to close out, as I said 2 years ago, I believe you deserve board members that have the necessary management skills to manage and direct a business of this size. You've got capital expenditures, you've got an operating budget well exceeding $20 million. You need somebody that understands cash flow, understands fund management, capital project management, performance management, long-term planning, contracts. Based upon my 19 months and especially my 35-year career in the aluminum business, I believe I have the qualifications. I thank you for your time, and I would appreciate your support and your vote. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Now, with some help by Linda and Annette, we're to the point where if anybody in the audience has a question, if you could raise your hand, they'll make their way around to Linda in the back. And I'm sorry, Joe, just before you start, so Mark, will you just turn these on? And then, thank you. Go ahead. Thanks, Joe.
I wanted to address the issue of you all avoided question 4 on the list, and so I want to go back to I think it was Steve and Marty were talking about replenishing the amenities budget and the maintenance budget. The key question is you never addressed how you would do it or where the money would come from, and I'd like to hear an answer for that.
Want me to go first? The first way I would address it is if you take a look at the past 6-year plan, the new 6-year plan. Since we depleted the reserves and took out a $1.2 billion loan, the assessments increases, the 5% that was put in, and you'll see they'll be put back in again for the next 5 years, is to rebuild those reserves. So as an example, if you take a look at the cash costs of running this business, a 1% increase in your POA fees will generate less than $100,000 per year in added revenue. So let's say it's $100,000 to make it easy. Your cash costs are about $14 million. A 1% economic increase due to the cost of labor and fuel, that's $140,000 a year. Part of that's picked up by user fees, the rest has got to be picked up by POA fees. So to answer the first part of the question is, we are taking, I don't know I haven't seen the numbers, it's either 2 to 3% of your POA fee increase will be directed straight to your reserves. Second piece, you'll see increases in connection fees, sewer connection fees, water connection fees, tank installation fees, which affect new home building to build up those reserves. And finally, my recommendation would be there are some areas I believe need to be cut where we can take funding from savings. As an example, we're having a discussion now, we haven't had it yet, but we're going to be talking about our legal expense. If you know, we have our attorney shows up for every meeting we have. The question I have raised and others have raised is, do we need that person there every single meeting? So those discussions have to occur. I believe there are areas, pockets in the budget that we can cut cost. Those savings go direct to the reserves.
So I don't know if I'll have a whole lot more to add to that. My initial response, had I gone first, would have been just, as Steve said last, looking at the budget. Where are areas that we think that we can challenge some of the different groups in reducing cost? That is the first one. If you look at question number 4 specifically, are our subsidies appropriate? I think that we've got to look at what we are charging for some of the amenities today that are getting subsidized. And we've got to be careful not to price ourselves, if we would raise the cost of the user fees on those, we don't price ourselves out of the competition, because then that would have a reverse effect on the revenue side. So that would be my response.
Other questions? If you've got one, if you raise your hand, please.
There was a mention that there's a long-range planning is planned on 144 new docks, and I presume that's in the Tennessee Basin, since I don't think there's any place else that's approved for that. And parking came up several times in several of the presentations. In the Tennessee Basin, there's only 50 parking spaces there for the present docks. If you add 144, what's the plan for parking for that?
So I think I threw the number 144 out there, so that's why I'll go first. But My understanding from going to the golf, or not the golf, but the docks committee meeting was that there are 144 potential new slips. 80 of those are in Tanasi, and the remaining 64 are in Kahiti. So, but directly to your question about what we're going to do about parking, I don't know that I don't have a solution today, but I think that that's something that we need to look at. I think if it was an easy question to answer, the board would have already resolved it. But we do need to look at it and say, what are our opportunities there? Because we know it's going to continue to get worse.
Well, the problem is you've already budgeted for 34 new slips for next year, and there's nothing being addressed for parking for those 34.
Can I, okay, and I was at that dock captain meeting too, and I think one of the great things, and I applaud Pat for this, is, and this is where I talked about change management. So what does change management look like? And that is everybody getting together to figure out what's the best option for the community. Now, does that mean everybody that's going to be happy about what that option is? Maybe yes, maybe no, but let's get together the folks who are saying, no, I don't want any more parking spots at Tanasi, and those folks that are saying we need more parking spots at Tanasi. Maybe there's some middle ground there. So I guess what I would offer is let's sit down as Pat had mentioned to that group there that day, and I would add, on the whole parking issue overall, what are some other options? What are some other ways that we can tackle the parking problem? Can we do things at different times of the day? All of those kinds of things. It's one of those, I don't think it's just for the board to come up with a magic bullet, but for the community to work together with the board and be ad hoc committees with the board to figure out what the best options are.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just don't understand why you would plan to build the docks and having to address the parking. That's my concern.
Based upon the data that we've seen today, there's only a couple of days a year where we're at capacity on parking at Tanasi. 4th of July, Memorial Day weekend. Well, we're taking a look at it, but at this point, what's in the budget, you're correct. We're going to put in 34 slips, and we have to address the parking. And there is a committee now that has been put together to work with the dock captains, with the local folks that have their property sitting right there by the docks, to come up with recommendations on how do you handle it.
Susan, did you want?
If I could, please, yes. I was also at the meeting. I've been to all but one of the budget meetings. I was at the dock captains meeting, and I was at a special meeting for candidates by the dock committee. And so I myself would like to readdress the high-dry storage idea, which is complex, will not be easy, will probably mean we're going to deal with state entities at the easiest, but I think it's something that needs to be re-examined as to whether or not it will help a solution. The immediate docks being put in Tenacity, it is in the plan, it looks like it will happen, and I do think that it's going to take the community coming together at the meetings, standing up, voicing how they feel, and seeing where we can find consensus on this. With growth comes change. Sometimes we don't always like it, sometimes it's not always comfortable, but what we need in that process is your participation in it. So please don't be afraid to come forward and speak up through the process. Thank you.
I spend a couple hours on 4 or 5 days a week, every week, in the Chota gym. And this for quite a few either no AC or heat or, various problems. And I'm wondering, that's at the HVAC system, how many more years is useful life of that? And, are we looking at replacing that in the near future?
Well, from the budget reviews we've had, I don't remember seeing anything specifically. Winston could answer that question with the status of the HVAC system at Chota. I can tell you there is some money in there now for, I'll call it renovation, but you've got monies in there for Chota. There are now monies in the budget for renovation at Tanasi Clubhouse, which didn't exist before. But to answer your question specifically, I'm going to have to go over and talk to Winston to see what's going on with that HVAC.
Another question? I'm sorry, yep.
My question, going back to number 4, so we talk about maintaining, improving, adding. We all know we have a great lifestyle here in Tellico Village. Everyone approaches that lifestyle differently. So my question is, and I don't have a lot of knowledge, I know you guys are working on a budget, I give you a lot of credit, it's a big job to do that. But I think sometimes we sidestepping the issue that maybe our current monthly fees that we pay, $131 a month, and with the 5% increase, and like everyone in this room, I don't want my expenses to go up, but are we really being realistic that what we're paying monthly is really sufficient to take care of what we're going to need in the future? So I look at the $131 a month that I'm paying now as being pretty good. Like, I think I get a lot for that $131 a month. And sometimes I actually think that maybe I'm not paying enough for what I'm getting or what we're going to need in the future. So that would be my question, is being a realist, are the monthly fees that we're paying now, and with the increases we're anticipating, I think 5% is the max that we're allowed to have on a yearly basis. You know more than I know about the budget. Are we looking at the fact that somewhere down the road we are going to have to make some changes to the maximum increase?
I can understand your concern in regard to the 5% increase. From sitting through the budget meetings that I did, and then I met separately with the finance department and some other people who are well-knowledged in financial matters, I asked a lot of questions, but I really was very pleased to watch the projections in the immediate 5 years and then extending out further years, that yes, it does look like that 5% will allow us, it will help build our reserves, and it will give us, in a planning strategy, what we are going to need to have. The one comment I do want to make is, although we cap ourselves at 5%, I don't want to ever assume that it automatically will be 5% every year. I want those costs examined every single year to know that we're being as cost effective as possible and giving you the best value for your money.
Could Steve also answer that question?
Yeah, based upon the current, we actually have, I think it's a 10-year financial plan with full financials, cash flow. If you take a look what's in the budget to cover expenses, capital, for the next 6 years, and you go at 5% a year for the first 5 years, 4% in year 6. What the numbers show under 2 scenarios is the reserves, you'll end up with $1.5 million in operating cash, which is what is a targeted number for operations. And we will reach $9 million if you meet all those assumptions over that period of time in your reserves by 2023, 2024. So the equation works. The issue is, how close are your assumptions in your 6-year plan versus actuality? But based upon the number of houses we're seeing assumed to be built, based upon the assessment going up 5% a year, based upon our head count, our material spend, our capital projects, which includes projects being paid out of the reserves, the numbers fit. It shows that we can get our reserves to a point they've never been. The board this year set a target of $9 million to be in all reserves, and that number came from, if you take a look at the financial statements, it's about, their last page footnote shows that the replacement cost is estimated to be $60 million here for the village. So if you assume the village is 50% used up, that says you should have $15 million, let's see, $30 million in reserve. And if you hit the typical funding for a HOA, POA, for reserves at 30%, that says you ought to have something around 9. So as a starting point, we've set a target at 9 until we do the study to determine how much do you really need. But long story short, the numbers prove out based upon the assumptions on growth, et cetera, to get our funds where they need to be in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yes, go, sure.
Part of your other question, too, on number 4 is, do you think current subsidies are appropriate, or should user fees be implemented or raised? I do think our current subsidies are appropriate. It's in our own best interest to make sure that we keep this village aesthetically, environmentally updated. We are considered one of the top-rated places to move to. That doesn't happen by magic or overnight. And so I do feel that the subsidies are allowing us that kind of lifestyle. The amenities and the aesthetics and environment were the number 2 concern on the survey that people took in regard to our long-range planning. And so these are part of what you're getting when you're paying those subsidies. What contributes to this village, what adds to our quality of life, our social fabric, the reason why we're here, the reason we decided to come here, the reason why we stay here. If we need user fees, I think that that'll be probably a very interesting discussion. And again, I would ask for all your participation because it's going to be an interesting topic. Whether we go there or not, I don't know, but it would be an interesting discussion to have.
And I'll just add one thing. I think another opportunity, and I mentioned it earlier, is this Teleco Foundation and the Timeless Teleco. So if you want to give more, you'll have an opportunity. Especially, and I say that a little bit in glib, but you know, especially if there's something that you feel very strongly about, an amenity that you think we need and others do as well, we'll have that opportunity to, you know, make it happen.
Well, and I guess I will
I'm sorry,
chime in a little bit here. And the other thing, and you know, maybe we're with the Governmental Affairs Committee now getting started, and with some other initiatives that are popping up within the greater community within Loudoun County. You know, let's not just say, geez, how do we fund that either through private funds within Tellico Village or through our subsidies or whatever else? Let's take a good. How can we partner with the greater community to do things? If we want to have a community center, how can we partner with the community? I think and we also need to take a look at what the greater community is going to be offering or is looking at offering down the road. So I don't think we have.
You can't imagine the effort that went into it and the process. So when you're talking about 5%, that's it. That's what the board has, and that's what they work on, and the budget is 5%. And it's compounded every year. So once you drop 5%, you lose that difference. So it has to be thought through very, very carefully.
Thanks for that, because the one thing when we think about our community, an answer, call up any board member and they will be more than willing to talk to you at any moment in time, practically. So I hope that helps a little bit, but I absolutely know what you mean, and I think that is so important that we not forget the people that really were here at the beginning and got us to where we are right now. So thanks for bringing that up.
I would echo those remarks. It's very important that once you get to a stage in life where you're not using any of the technology, where you're not linked into email or websites or whatever, that you still find that you're being informed, kept up to date, and that does rely on the paper technology. It does rely on just regular telephones. It relies on the back and forth communication and having meetings. And if that meant a board member going down or taking that part of the community under their wing, and they're responsible for the communications to that part of the village while they're on the board, then that's one way to do it. They'd be their liaison to that part of the community. So I would welcome other suggestions on how to approach that, but that's my immediate thoughts on that.
And just to tag on that a little bit more is, we do have a publication that gets delivered pretty frequently now, and that's the connection. So we have a mechanism, and maybe we just need to leverage that more as well.
The other thing I would add is we need to take a hard look at this and have Winston and his staff, Beth specifically, to identify actions, to first define who the group is and what they will do to make sure that the communication goes out. So I'd turn it back over to Winston and support that activity.
I'm sorry, and then Dennis has one after Linda. Yes, sir.
The thing that separates Tellico Village from anything even close to the surrounding areas is the diversification of the people that we have here and the social interaction that takes place among that diversified population. The focal point of that get-together has been the yacht club. And if you've been there and passed during a new villagers meeting, you find that the cars are being parked out on Sequoia Road coming in because they don't have enough space. And if you get there on a Friday night on a tiki bar or something, it's busting at its seams. If the projection of 3% a year growth, which I think I read someplace per year, by 26 or 27, 2026 or 27, will be over 10,000 people in this village. I have not heard anything in previous plans and so on to address that issue in terms of having a venue for that social interaction, as far as either expanding the yacht club or building something else, which has limitations as well. I'd like to know, in the 5-year plan that's coming up, is there anything addressing that issue? I know we have to wait for the strategic plan to come up, but the timing is a lot closer than what it's perceived to have been in the future, or in the past, rather.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the strategic plan, because certainly when we do start looking at 10,000 people, we have to figure out how we do things a little differently. And certainly we have to wait and see what that says for the long term. But for the near term, again, I would go back to we all have to work together with our neighbors and figure out, how do we make these things work? So how did we all get to Oktoberfest because there wasn't enough parking there? Well, there was a shuttle that helped us get there. How do we, how do urban environments where there just simply isn't enough parking to get to all of the docks that are sitting on Lake Michigan or Pick Your Lake or whatever? How do you do that? So there's got to be ways to figure out how to do that, and I think a lot of that is us working together. Maybe we learn to carpool again, maybe whatever. But I think there's got to be community involvement in figuring out some of these things in the short term until we get to the long term.
I'm sorry, I think you misinterpreted what I was saying. I understand the parking issue. It's not the parking issue. It's the facility itself. It's busting at its seams. The fire marshal's only going to allow you to have so many people in a building at one time. And we're looking at 26 or 27 for 10,000 people. We have 8,500 now, okay? You're going to reach overcapacity way before you get to 10,000 people. So the thing that concerns me is I have not seen anything in the previous strategic plan or within the 5-year plan, because it's going to hit us before 5 years are up, to address that social venue and what is going to happen so we can still provide a venue for that social interaction, which is absolutely near and dear to everybody that lives in this community.
I thought I was being nice by letting Sue go first, and then she stole my thunder about the shuttle. So, no, it's a great idea, and it's one that I think we're going to have to really give consideration to implementing in order to relieve parking, because It's not right that the parking situation exists as it is. In the case of an emergency, if fire trucks needed to get down and in there, you'd have a real problem. In regard to the facility itself, you're absolutely right. There's no magic answers for the immediate 5 years we're looking at, and yet the people are coming. It's a popular event. I'd like some consideration to be given. You've got to think outside the box, what works, what doesn't work. The ladies' luncheon in December takes all 3 floors of the yacht club because they all kinds of merchandise for sale, and people have their tables where they're going to have lunch, but they go upstairs to look at the different vendors and find things. And I think that in order to handle the volume of people and the noise level and the crowding situation, that maybe that's an idea that could expand it on nights for new villagers and HOA. Is it the best solution? Maybe not, but would it help keep from cramming that many people into one room together? How you address things then when someone's addressing from the podium the way they do, unless they can pipe intercom up there, whether or not they could get a PA system, I don't know. But again, in order to solve this in the immediate nature, you need to think outside the box and see what would work and accommodate those people coming. But as far as the parking situation, I think the shuttle is the best idea on New Villagers Night and HOA Night, and in fact, any other event that's happening where there's that capacity. We shouldn't be allowing that over parking situation to exist. We should begin to have a shuttle service as they do for Oktoberfest and T-Bard's big Oktoberfest. No, it's not October, it's May when T-Bard has it. Whatever, Bratfest, thank you. So that's my immediate thoughts in regard to that. Marty?
I guess I have to say something now. I think that the yacht club is the premier location in the village, and that we really need to think about what we're going to do with that facility. It is the population has outgrown it, especially for several events, and we need to think about how we're going to handle that long term. You know, the people talk about the community center. Well, that would not be at the same location, so we would lose that advantage of having that great location where you overlook the water, which I think is a signature for Tellico Village. So, I mean, I don't have the answer, but I think we really have to look at that and say, okay, what can we do, both in terms of the facility and parking, to be able to accommodate that and be prepared for future growth here.
Steve, do you want? Okay. Thanks. Then, Dennis, we'll make this the last question, if you don't mind, please, just so we can get you guys out close to on time.
Thanks, Ellen. This is actually just kind of a follow-up to comments Sue made. To what extent has the group pursued funding sources outside of the local community? What I mean by that is perhaps there's some state sources, county sources, adjacent community sources that might be available. I mean, Tellico Village has an impact on all of those things. And have we done much working with some of those outside agencies that may be able to, in even a small way, help supplement some of the funding that we're looking for?
I know that we, the board, the current board, has gone to the county commission asking for their cooperation on some funding issues and has not had a good response. Our state representative did help get us a tax exemption. It's one of the reasons I myself got involved in the Governmental Affairs Committee, because of my past experience with funding, finding alternate sources of revenue or funding options where I lived before. And so I have spent some time researching those funds that might be available to a 501c4, which is what we are. It may ultimately mean that the board would have to consider, is it worth using on a consulting basis a grant writer? But those are things that I'd like to explore. Kind of like a dog with a bone on that issue. It's one of my favorite things. If there's funding out there, if there's ways for us to consider alternate ways to do things and take some of the cost off the village, I'm all for it. And so I'm all for spending some time exploring that.
Anybody else want to? Okay. So I want to thank those of you. I want to thank the volunteers, the community church, but I really want to thank these 4 candidates to get up here and share their views. 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 And share The scary part to me would be the Q&A with no preparation, and I want to thank you guys for sharing your thoughts so we can be better informed when voting starts on November 3rd. Thank you very much.